As a poor high school girl from a remote mountain town in western China, my greatest dream in life had always been painfully simple. Get into Tsinghua or Peking University, pass the civil service exam, and someday earn a Beijing household registration. That was it. Every day, I buried myself in textbooks until my vision blurred and my thoughts turned numb. Stress devoured me whole. Clumps of hair fell from my scalp every time I washed it. To a senior student preparing for the Gaokao, exhaustion was normal. Pain was normal. Sleep was a luxury. Then, during the first mock exam of senior year, a piece of news shattered my entire world. I was the biological daughter of the Su family in Beijing. 17 years ago, I had been switched at birth. For the first time in months, light returned to my deadened eyes. My best friend looked far more worried than happy. "In every rich family novel I've ever read," she muttered nervously, "the wealthy parents always protect the fake daughter. Be careful, okay?" I smiled faintly and gently rubbed her head. "Relax. I only need the Beijing hukou. Once I finish university, I'll leave." After all, before my grandmother passed away, her greatest wish had been for me to succeed in life. So I came to the Su residence wearing my faded school uniform, carrying a worn canvas backpack with frayed straps and shoes whose soles had nearly peeled off completely. I looked absurd standing inside the Su family's dazzling mansion, where everything gleamed with gold, crystal, and polished marble. The housekeeper led me into the luxurious living room and politely told me to wait. From upstairs came the violent sound of objects smashing against the floor, followed by the shrill cries of a girl on the verge of collapse. Several people were trying to comfort her. I sat quietly downstairs, listening. "Ziyi, don't be scared. You're still better than her. You're the daughter Mom raised for 17 years. That was Madame Su. "If Lin Siwang behaves, we'll keep her. If not, we'll kick her out once she's grown." The arrogant voice belonged to second brother Su. "Enough crying. Don't embarrass yourself in front of outsiders." The cold, restrained voice was eldest brother. I lowered my eyes silently. Ah, so this was their warning display. For some reason, disappointment washed over me. I had already wasted 2 whole days because of this family reunion. To a senior student, that was practically moral corruption. They were clearly going to continue their family drama for a while, so I quietly pulled out my exercise book. 5 years of Gaokao, 3 years of simulations. The final close test was difficult enough to make my scalp tingle. My scratch paper was almost filled when a voice interrupted me. "We're done talking now. You can come over." "Wait a second," I replied without looking up. A flash of inspiration sparked through my mind. I almost solved it. "You're pretending to study on purpose, aren't you?" Second brother sneered. "Trying to create a top student image?" He reached over and snatched my exam paper. I immediately smacked the back of his hand with my pen. "Move. Be quiet." I was this close to solving it. He yelped in pain. I pulled the paper back, finally raising my head, only to find the entire Su family staring at me with displeased expressions. Madame Su hesitated awkwardly. "Siwang, next time, don't study in the living room. The coffee table isn't convenient and everyone's been waiting for you." I answered politely. "I'm sorry. I thought everyone was still upstairs talking. Besides, I don't have a room yet, so I could only study here." The room fell silent. Madame Su froze slightly before turning toward eldest brother in confusion. He immediately scolded the housekeeper. "Aunt Wang, why didn't you inform us when she arrived?" Aunt Wang glanced at Su Jiyi and shrugged casually. "I heard all the noise upstairs and assumed you weren't done yet." Beside them, Su Jiyi shrank timidly, looking frightened. Madame Su instantly wrapped an arm around her to comfort her. I stared at them speechlessly. Seriously? Was this the acting standard of wealthy families? Father Su finally looked me over from head to toe. Seeing that I remained calm and polite, he appeared somewhat satisfied. "Lin Su Wang," he said slowly, "you didn't grow up in the Su family, so you've inevitably developed certain bad habits. Ji Yi's school environment may not suit you yet. First, you should learn the rules of the Su household." He nodded toward the butler. "Write these down." The butler respectfully handed me a long sheet of paper. I skimmed through it. The master preferred silence. The master hated celery. Servants were forbidden from making eye contact. Everyone had to bow 90 degrees when serving tea. The mistress drank bone broth every morning at 6. The young miss liked braised eggplant, but disliked beef. Breakfast had to be Western style. The page was densely packed with absurd household rules and areas I was forbidden to enter. For a second, I genuinely wondered whether I had somehow traveled back in time. Was this real life? It felt more like I'd transmigrated into some melodramatic novel, where the real daughter returns home only to become the family's bullied side character. I handed the paper back calmly. "I'm sorry," I said politely. "I returned to the Su family to study better for the college entrance exam, not to drop out and become a servant. If this house truly doesn't welcome me, I can leave." Father Su frowned in confusion. He unfolded the paper himself, and as he read, his expression darkened visibly. He turned toward Su Ji Yi. The girl beside him had already gone pale. A moment later, Father Su crumpled the paper and threw it aside. "It was the butler's mistake," he said stiffly. "She accidentally gave you the servant's rules." I understood perfectly. He was protecting Su Ji Yi's dignity. But why was it supposed to end so easily? I looked up calmly. "Can I ask for an apology?" The room went silent again. Father Su stared at me for several seconds before finally nodding. "What do you want?" "I want to transfer into Ji Yi's school." A flicker of hesitation crossed his face, but guilt eventually forced him to compromise. "Fine. Follow Ji Yi there. Just don't cause trouble." I nodded immediately. "I heard the teachers there are all graduates from Tsinghua and Peking University. I'll work very hard." Across the room, Su Ji Yi's fingers dug into the wall until her knuckles turned white. Madame Su and eldest brother exchanged puzzled looks, while second brother glared at me angrily. "I thought you said you only cared about family," he snapped. "Now the moment she comes back, Ji Yi has to suffer?" Su Zu Yi's eyes reddened instantly. She shook her head weakly. "Second brother, stop talking." Then she turned toward me with trembling lips. "Sister, I won't fight with you. I'll leave the Su family and return to my real parents." "No need," I replied immediately. Tears welled in her eyes. "But you're the real Su Ji Yi. I should be Lin Ji Yi instead." "No," I interrupted again. Second brother exploded. "This is Ji Yi's home. Don't even think about driving her away." I opened my mouth to explain, but then stopped. Forget it. Let them continue acting. At that moment, I finally understood. Su Ji Yi was the classic White Lotus heroine, while second brother was simply an idiot wearing luxury clothing. A free, live-action family melodrama. And I sat there quietly watching it all, treating it as entertainment worthy of someone who had scored 650 on mock exams. Su Ji Yi insisted dramatically that she wanted to leave. Both Su brothers hugged her anxiously, comforting her as though she might shatter. I got so bored that I started silently memorizing classical Chinese essays in my head while observing the situation. Madame Su suddenly turned toward me. "Si Wang, Ji Yi isn't at fault either. This is still her home. Could you treat her kindly?" I placed my pen down and looked at her seriously. "You should ask her that question instead. In this house, I have no power at all. She's the one deciding what kind of relationship we'll have." Second brother slammed the table. "So you're accusing us of treating you unfairly?" I stared at him in disbelief. Was there genuinely something wrong with his brain? The contempt in my eyes clearly wounded his pride. He raised his fist as if ready to charge at me, but eldest brother stopped him just in time. Father Su frowned deeply. So what exactly are you dissatisfied with? Our favoritism? Or the fact that you were lost all those years ago? I answered calmly. Please don't twist concepts to avoid the truth. I understand favoritism. At the orphanage, I also had people I cared about deeply. If outsiders fought them, of course I'd defend them too. But, eldest brother interrupted coldly, those family members of yours are just orphans. Trash. If we don't protect Ji Yi, should we protect a stranger like you? Silence stretched between us. Then I nodded slowly. I understand now. You people will never understand me. You raised Su Ji Yi yourselves. Of course you understand her better than me. Of course your feelings are deeper. I looked directly at Su Ji Yi. If she truly wanted to leave, she would quietly pack her things and go. She wouldn't create a scene dramatic enough to force everyone to choose. But that confidence, the certainty that everyone here will protect her, that's something all of you gave her. In the end, nobody in this room is innocent. The entire living room fell silent. Then I turned toward Su Ji Yi seriously. Do you truly want to leave? I won't stop you. Her eyes reddened immediately. Yes, she whispered pitifully. I'm sorry, sister. I nodded calmly. Fine. If that's truly your decision, then I'll help you. I turned toward the butler and asked which room belonged to Su Ji Yi so I could help pack her luggage. Before I could take a step, second brother violently shoved me away. My body slammed against the edge of the table. A teapot crashed to the ground, boiling tea splashing all over me. That's enough, he roared. How can you be this vicious? You've only been here a few days and already want to kick her out? She grew up spoiled and loved her entire life. If she leaves her family, how is she supposed to survive? Madame Su hurried over to help me stand. My arm had already bruised dark purple where it hit the table. Tea soaked through my shirt, the bitter smell clinging heavily to my skin. I lowered my eyes quietly. But she said she wanted to leave voluntarily. I already asked her. People should take responsibility for their own choices. Madame Su sighed helplessly. Ji Yi is just too kind. She cried until her eyes turned red. How could she truly want to leave? She's also a victim. Eldest brother added irritably. You know how terrible Ji Yi's biological parents are. If she returns to them, her life will be ruined. You wouldn't want parents like that either. I stared silently at Su Ji Yi's tears dripping onto the floor. Then I suddenly felt lucky. Lucky that I had been the one switched away, not my best friend. If it had been her standing here, she would have cried herself to pieces by now, and I would have had to comfort her. I looked at Su Ji Yi, the precious princess protected by everyone in the room, and finally sighed softly. They had never intended to let her leave, and she had never truly wanted to leave either. Then why create such a performance? To appear pitiful? To show me my place? To flaunt the love she possessed? She had lived 17 years as a princess. Meanwhile, her biological parents had thrown me into an orphanage. The only true victim here had always been me. And Su Ji Yi? She was the beneficiary. The moment those words left my mouth, the entire room froze. Madame Su's face stiffened instantly. Su Ji Yi stopped crying. Even the two Su brothers stared at me blankly, as though they had only just realized something they had desperately avoided thinking about. Honestly, they were exhausting, and I was stupid too, forever believing I could reason with people like them. I bent down calmly, picked up my old backpack, then turned politely toward the housekeeper. I traveled all day, I said softly. I'd like to rest now. Madame Su and Su Ji hurried after me upstairs. "Siwang," Madame Su asked awkwardly, "which room would you like?" I looked around at the luxurious rooms lining the hallway. Bright chandeliers, soft carpets, expensive paintings, spacious bedrooms larger than my entire dormitory back home. Places I had never imagined living in. At the orphanage, my best friend and I used to sleep inside a storage room filled with old cardboard boxes and cleaning supplies. At school, 12 girls squeezed into one tiny dorm room. Only when I stayed with Grandma did I ever have a room of my own. A tiny, shabby room, but still mine. Seeing me hesitate, Su Ji suddenly pushed open her bedroom door. The room looked like something out of a fairy tale. Pink curtains, crystal lamps, a giant bed covered in plush toys. Designer bags stacked neatly beside a glass cabinet full of jewelry. Luxury saturated every corner of the room. Su Ji lowered her eyes pitifully. "Sister, this room should have belonged to you in the first place. If you want it, I can give it back." Her voice trembled delicately, as if she were enduring unbearable pain. Madame Su's eyes instantly filled with heartache. "Our Ji Yi is such a kind child." For some reason, my chest suddenly hurt a little. Grandma had hugged me like that too. She used to call me her precious girl. She had always hoped someone would love me properly someday. I had prepared myself long ago for a life without parental love. But still. For a brief moment, jealousy stabbed through me before I quickly smacked both hands against my own head. Enough. This would be the last time I envied anyone. Study harder, earn money, build your own future. Then nobody will ever have the power to hurt you again. At that moment, eldest brother walked upstairs. He saw Su Ji standing sadly beside the open bedroom door, then noticed me staring silently at the room. His expression darkened immediately. "Mom," he said coldly, "this is Ji Yi's room. There are plenty of other rooms in the house. Why insist on this one? Even if Lin Siwang's life was miserable, you can compensate her in other ways. Don't ignore Ji Yi's feelings." Second brother was still downstairs trying to process what I'd said earlier and hadn't followed yet. Su Ji quickly shook her head while crying softly. "No, don't blame sister." I turned away lazily. "Keep the room. If something isn't given willingly, there's no need to put on a performance for others." Su Ji's expression stiffened. I pointed toward the room farthest from the family bedrooms. "That one is fine. It's quiet. Better for studying." Madame Su and eldest brother both looked over carefully. Only then did they realize all the rooms in that section were basically empty model rooms. Clean, but lifeless, without any warmth or personal touches. Madame Su hurriedly explained awkwardly, "We didn't know what style you liked yet. If there's anything you want, just tell the servants. Mom will prepare everything for you." She smiled cautiously. But when she saw my calm, emotionless face, guilt suddenly flickered across her eyes. After hesitating for several seconds, she finally asked softly, "Siwang, can you call me Mom just once?" She looked at me expectantly. I was about to refuse, but suddenly Su Ji threw herself into Madame Su's arms. "Mom, Mom." She clung tightly to her, crying as though all the grievances in her heart had finally burst out. Madame Su immediately forgot about me and focused entirely on comforting her beloved daughter. I caught the tiny flash of triumph hidden deep inside Su Ji's watery eyes. The words at the tip of my tongue instantly disappeared. I quietly turned around and walked back toward my room. Too embarrassing. I even slapped my own mouth lightly afterward. Stupid reflexes. Did she seriously think I was actually about to call Madame Su Mom? The next morning was my first day at the new school. With only a few tearful complaints from Su Ji, second brother instantly decided I was pretending to be pitiful and needed a lesson. He casually told the driver he'd personally take Ji Yi to school today, then coldly informed me not to get in the car. Afterward, he drove away with Su Ji Yi, who looked apologetic yet still comfortably sat beside him without protest. The villa district had no taxis or public transportation nearby. Left with no choice, I called Father Su. After hearing the situation, he immediately asked the son of the neighboring Gao family to drive me instead. I knew who he was. Gao Yan, the man Su Ji Yi secretly liked, the same man who had once rejected her confession. Even so, Madame Su constantly tried to use Su Ji Yi to climb higher socially through the Gao family. The moment I got into Gao Yan's car, I nearly died from secondhand embarrassment. This was the first time I regretted returning to the Su family. Worse, I suddenly realized I hadn't properly reviewed my lessons these past few days. What if my scores dropped? The thought terrified me so much that I immediately pulled out my vocabulary book and started memorizing words like my life depended on it. Gao Yan glanced at me once. He looked polite on the surface, but his personality was obviously cold and distant. Perhaps because he didn't want me to misunderstand anything, he remained silent the entire drive. When we arrived, he finally spoke. "If you need help next time, just ring the bell next door." Then he drove away without another word. At the school gate, the homeroom teacher was already waiting for me. He was also Su Ji Yi's homeroom teacher. The moment he saw me, he adjusted his glasses and said politely, "You're the distant relative staying with the Su family, right? Ji Yi already explained your situation." He paused briefly before continuing. "Your academic foundation is probably too weak for the advanced class. You likely won't keep up. I think the regular class would suit you better." My brows immediately furrowed. Academics were my absolute bottom line. No one was allowed to step on that. I asked politely, "What's the average score in the advanced class?" "Around 600. "What about Su Ji Yi's score?" "She's an art student, about 30 or 40 points below the top university admission line." I blinked slowly. "Then shouldn't she also be in the regular class?" The teacher's expression instantly turned impatient. "She's different. Her score is already considered excellent for an art student. Besides, the students in the advanced class are all close friends. I don't want you affecting their atmosphere." "So," he asked bluntly, "you don't want the regular class?" I smiled brightly. "No, I do. Very much, actually." Thank God. At least I wouldn't have to sit in the same classroom as Su Ji Yi every day. Otherwise, I might genuinely lose my mind. Ever since entering the Su household, everything around me had started feeling upside down. The school clearly had access to my academic records, yet everyone blindly believed whatever Su Ji Yi said. When I entered the classroom 1 minute late, the teacher asked me to introduce myself. "My name is Lin Suwang," I said calmly. "I hope we can all study and get along well together during the next 6 months." Whispers immediately erupted throughout the room. "Lin? Is there some rich Lin family in Beijing? I heard she transferred from Hat Province. That place studies like crazy all day long." Meaning they're dumb enough to only know studying. Laughter spread across the classroom. No one approached me. No one tried talking to me. I found an empty seat near the back and sat down happily. Perfect. No interruptions. Every day afterward, I quietly buried myself in problem sets. When I got hungry, I bought bread from the cafeteria and returned immediately to studying. After learning that Gao Yan had driven me to school once, Su Ji Yi immediately begged second brother to start picking me up together with her every day. 1 week later, the school organized a major mock exam modeled after the real Beijing Gaokao. Everyone treated it seriously. Madame Su even personally cooked nourishing soup for Su Ji Yi to help her prepare mentally. Meanwhile, inside the examination hall, the moment I opened the Beijing exam paper, I almost laughed out loud. My fingers trembled slightly with excitement. So this was the famous Beijing exam? It felt ridiculously manageable. I suddenly remembered something my best friend once said: "The Beijing papers will give you confidence you never knew you had." Now I finally understood. Let these people witness the true terror of students raised in provinces where studying until your hair falls out is considered normal. I was a monster forged in Hat Province, a top student who consistently scored above 650 without bonus points. A creature who slept at 1 in the morning, woke at 5, and only rested half a day each month. A genuine exam machine. Finally. It was hunting season. I lowered my head and started writing furiously. The boy beside me kept flipping through the paper in disbelief. Wait, it's this easy? Even the invigilator stopped beside my desk repeatedly. Her expression grew stranger each time she looked at my answer sheet. A regular class student solving problems this fast? When she finally peeked at my work properly, her eyes lit up instantly. Treasure. Absolute treasure. The girl had barely finished speaking when the entire ballroom fell into stunned silence. But only a few seconds later, mocking laughter began echoing through the crowd. Some people even clapped sarcastically, as if they were watching a cheap comedy show. Did I hear that right? A trash collector talking about investments? She's gotten so desperate to climb the social ladder that she's lost her mind. I bet she'll be crying her eyes out and crawling back to the slums within a month. Every word was as sharp as a blade, cutting straight into her ears. Yet strangely, her expression remained terrifyingly calm. No anger, no argument, only a growing coldness in her eyes. The man standing beside the fake heiress curled his lips into a sneer. Though he lowered his voice, it was still loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Some people are born low class. No matter how expensive the dress they wear, they can never hide the smell of poverty. At that moment, her gaze finally shifted toward him. The crystal lights reflected in her icy eyes, making the man instinctively uneasy. She slowly placed her wine glass onto the table. "You're right." The entire room froze for a brief second. Some people can wear designer suits and billion-dollar watches, yet still fail to hide their stupidity. The moment her words landed, the mocking smiles on several faces instantly stiffened. The man's expression darkened. "What did you just say?" She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a faint smile that carried no warmth at all. "I said, money can buy luxury, but it clearly can't buy intelligence." A few gasps quietly spread through the crowd. No one had expected the real heiress they once looked down on to speak back so fearlessly. The fake heiress immediately stepped forward, pretending to sound concerned while tightening her grip around the man's arm. "Please don't blame her. She grew up in a terrible environment. It's normal for her to lack manners." The words sounded gentle on the surface, yet every syllable was carefully sharpened to humiliate her even further. But before anyone could join in again, a deep voice suddenly echoed from the entrance of the ballroom. "She lacks manners?" The atmosphere instantly changed. One by one, the guests turned toward the massive golden doors. A tall man in a black suit slowly walked inside, surrounded by several assistants. His presence alone was enough to silence the entire room. The moment the fake heiress saw him, the color drained from her face. Even the arrogant man beside her unconsciously straightened his posture. Because everyone in the city knew exactly who he was. The man who could destroy an entire corporation with a single sentence. And right now, his cold gaze was locked entirely on her. The sound of his leather shoes echoed sharply across the marble floor, each step sending invisible pressure through the silent ballroom. No one dared to breathe too loudly. The fake heiress forced a smile onto her pale face and quickly stepped forward. "Mr. Lancaster, I didn't know you were coming tonight." But the man never even looked at her. His eyes remained fixed on the girl standing alone near the table, the very girl everyone had mocked just moments ago. Under the crystal chandelier, Her expression stayed calm, though the redness around her fingers revealed how tightly she had been clenching them. For a brief second, something unreadable flickered across his cold eyes. Then he spoke. "Who allowed you people to insult my fiancée?" The entire ballroom exploded into silence. Several guests nearly dropped their wine glasses in shock. Fiancé? The fake heiress's face turned completely white. "That's impossible," she whispered instinctively. The arrogant man from earlier immediately forced out a nervous laugh. "Mr. Lancaster, there must be some misunderstanding. We only thought she was—" "You thought." His icy voice cut through the air like a blade. The man instantly shut his mouth. Mr. Lancaster slowly walked toward her before removing his suit jacket and placing it gently over her shoulders. The movement was calm, almost protective, yet it terrified everyone watching, because the colder a powerful man acted, the more dangerous he usually became. He lowered his eyes toward the faint red mark on her wrist, left from someone grabbing her earlier. His expression darkened instantly. "Who touched her?" The question fell like a death sentence over the ballroom. No one answered. The guests, who had been laughing moments ago, now lowered their heads, avoiding his gaze entirely. Even the sound of breathing seemed to disappear beneath the crushing silence. Then suddenly, a trembling voice broke through the tension. It was me." The arrogant man stepped forward with a stiff expression, though the sweat dripping down his temple exposed his panic completely. I didn't know she was your fiancée, Mr. Lancaster. If I had known—" "You wouldn't have humiliated her publicly?" His voice remained calm. That calmness was far more terrifying than shouting. The man froze. Mr. Lancaster slowly adjusted the cuff of his sleeve before speaking again. "So, if she had no background, then she deserved it?" No, that's not what I meant." "But that's exactly what you meant." His cold eyes finally lifted toward the crowd around them. "And the rest of you?" No one dared to speak. A few wealthy socialites who had mocked her earlier were already trembling so badly they could barely hold their glasses steady. The fake heiress clenched her fists tightly, nails digging into her palms. She could accept losing attention. She could accept losing status, but she could never accept one thing. The girl she had spent years humiliating was now standing beside the most untouchable man in the city. Her voice shook slightly as she forced herself to speak. "Sister, you must have hidden this relationship on purpose. Otherwise, we would never have misunderstood you." The innocent tone almost sounded convincing. Almost. But the girl merely looked at her quietly for several seconds before letting out a soft laugh. "Hidden?" After years of being abandoned, insulted, and treated like garbage, now they suddenly wanted to act like family again? She slowly lifted her eyes toward the fake heiress, her expression unreadable beneath the dazzling chandelier lights. "Family?" she repeated softly. The word sounded almost ironic coming from her lips. "Do you really want to talk about family?" The fake heiress's smile stiffened instantly. A strange unease began spreading through the crowd. Everyone could feel it now. Something far bigger was hidden beneath tonight's humiliation. The girl reached into her handbag calmly and pulled out a thin stack of documents. "I originally didn't want to do this here," she said quietly. "But since everyone seems so interested in my background, then let's make things clear." She handed the papers directly to Mr. Lancaster. The moment his eyes scanned the first page, the temperature around him seemed to drop several degrees. "Impossible," the fake heiress whispered. Mr. Lancaster slowly lifted his gaze. These hospital records were altered 20 years ago. The room instantly erupted into shocked murmurs. "A newborn identity swap," he continued coldly, "which means the real daughter of the Harrington family," his eyes turned toward the girl beside him, "was never the one they raised." The fake heiress staggered backward as if struck by lightning. "No, No, that can't be true. But the girl simply looked at her with terrifying calmness. You stole my life, she said softly. While I spent 20 years surviving in poverty, you enjoyed everything that belonged to me. The fake heiress shook her head violently, tears instantly filling her eyes. No, I didn't know anything about this. It wasn't my fault. Her voice cracked as she desperately looked toward the wealthy couple standing near the center of the ballroom. Mom, Dad, say something. But neither of them moved. The Harrington couple stood frozen in place, their faces drained of all color as the truth crashed down around them. Mrs. Harrington's hands trembled uncontrollably while staring at the girl before her. The familiar eyes, the same smile she once saw in the mirror when she was younger. Details she had ignored for years suddenly became impossible to overlook. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrington looked as though he had aged 10 years within seconds. Because deep down, he already knew the documents were real. The girl let out a quiet laugh, though there was no happiness in it. Interesting, isn't it? She said softly. When I begged for help years ago, your family treated me like dirt. Her gaze slowly swept across the room. You called me greedy, shameless, a liar trying to steal someone else's life. Every sentence made the Harrington family's faces grow paler. And now the truth is finally here. Her eyes landed on the fake heiress once again. Yet suddenly everyone wants to explain themselves. The fake heiress's breathing became uneven. For the first time in her life, the perfect image she had built so carefully was collapsing in front of everyone. No, she whispered. Please. But the girl's expression never changed, because no apology in this world could return the 20 years stolen from her. Mrs. Harrington suddenly broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she stumbled toward the girl with trembling hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, she choked out. We didn't know. We never knew. For the first time, the elegant woman who had always carried herself with pride looked completely shattered. But the girl did not move. She simply stood there quietly while watching the woman cry in front of her. A strange ache tightened inside her chest. Because this was the moment she had dreamed about for years, the moment her real family would finally recognize her. Yet, somehow, it no longer felt the way she once imagined. Mr. Harrington lowered his head heavily before speaking in a hoarse voice. We failed you. The ballroom remained deathly silent. Not long ago, these same people had mocked her without mercy. Now, no one even dared to meet her eyes. The fake heiress suddenly grabbed Mrs. Harrington's arm in panic. Mom, you still love me, right? Her voice sounded desperate, fragile, terrified. I was your daughter for 20 years. Mrs. Harrington froze instantly. Pain filled her eyes, because despite everything, the girl before her was still the child she had raised with her own hands. But before she could answer, the girl calmly spoke. Don't worry. Everyone turned toward her. She slowly stepped forward, her voice steady and emotionless. I'm not here to steal anyone's place. The fake heiress stared at her in disbelief. What? The girl looked around the luxurious ballroom one last time. The Harrington family name, the wealth, the status. A faint smile appeared on her lips. I don't need any of it anymore. Then, in front of the shocked crowd, she reached for Mr. Lancaster's hand, and this time, he held hers tightly without hesitation. The moment their hands intertwined, countless emotions flashed across the crowd's faces. Shock, jealousy, regret, but most of all, fear. Because everyone finally realized they had offended the one person they never should have touched. Mr. Lancaster glanced down at her quietly. Do you want to leave? He asked in a low voice. She remained silent for a few seconds before nodding faintly. This place no longer meant anything to her. Not the luxurious crystal chandeliers, not the expensive gowns, not even the family she had spent half her life searching for. Just as they turned to leave, a frantic voice suddenly rang out behind them. "Wait!" The fake heiress rushed forward desperately, tears covering her face. "You can't just walk away like this." Her breathing was uneven, almost hysterical now. "If you leave, then what about me?" The entire ballroom fell silent again. The girl slowly turned around. For the first time, she truly looked at the person who had stolen her life. The perfectly styled hair, the designer dress, the fragile expression that once fooled everyone. And suddenly, she felt tired. Not angry, not hateful, just exhausted. "You know what's funny?" she said softly. The fake heiress froze. "I used to hate you so much." Her voice remained calm, but every word pierced deeper than a knife. "I wondered why someone like you got everything while I had to suffer just to survive." The fake heiress's lips trembled violently. "But now, I finally understand something." The girl stepped closer slowly. "You were never the reason my life was ruined." Tears rolled down the fake heiress's cheeks, because somehow those words felt even crueler than blame. The girl lowered her eyes briefly. "The real monsters." Her gaze slowly shifted toward several older faces standing silently in the crowd. "Were the adults who knew the truth and stayed quiet." The atmosphere instantly changed. Mr. Harrington's expression froze. Mrs. Harrington covered her mouth in shock, and near the back of the ballroom, an elderly woman suddenly dropped her wine glass. The sharp sound of shattering glass echoed through the silent ballroom. Everyone turned toward the elderly woman standing near the back. Her face had gone completely pale. "No," she whispered weakly. "That's impossible." But the terror in her eyes had already exposed everything. The girl stared at her quietly, and in that single moment, pieces of a broken puzzle finally began connecting in her mind. The strange coldness whenever she visited the Harrington estate as a child. The servants secretly whispering behind her back. The way the old woman always looked at her with fear instead of disgust. Mr. Lancaster's voice cut through the silence. "You knew." It wasn't a question. The elderly woman staggered backward, gripping the table for support. Mrs. Harrington turned toward her slowly, disbelief written all over her face. "Mother." Tears instantly welled in the old woman's eyes. "I was trying to protect this family," she cried shakily. The ballroom erupted into chaos. "You knew all along? How could you hide something like this for 20 years? Mrs. Harrington's entire body trembled violently. "You let my real daughter suffer out there alone?" Her voice cracked so painfully that several guests lowered their heads in discomfort. The old woman burst into tears. "The doctor told me one child was weak, sickly, unlikely to survive, and the other baby," she pointed trembling fingers toward the fake heiress, "was healthy, beautiful, perfect." The fake heiress's face turned ghostly white. "So you switched us," the girl finished quietly. The old woman collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. "I thought I was saving the Harrington family." But no one in the room looked sympathetic anymore, because what she had destroyed was not just a life. It was 20 years of identity, love, and belonging. Mrs. Harrington suddenly broke down completely. She rushed toward the girl with shaking hands. "Please," she begged through tears, "come home with us." For the first time, the girl's calm expression finally cracked slightly. Not because of the mansion, not because of the family name, but because deep inside her heart, a small part of her had waited her entire life to hear those words. The ballroom became so quiet that even the sound of Mrs. Harrington's trembling breaths could be heard clearly. "Please, come home." The words lingered painfully in the air. The girl lowered her eyes slowly. Home. Such a simple word. Yet for her, it had always felt impossibly far away. She remembered the tiny, leaking apartment she grew up in, winters without heating, nights spent hungry, the exhaustion of working multiple jobs just to survive, while other girls her age worried about parties and vacations. And now, the people who once ignored her existence were suddenly offering her everything she had been denied. It should have made her happy. But instead, it only made her heart ache more. Mr. Lancaster quietly noticed the slight trembling of her fingers. Without saying a word, he tightened his grip around her hand. A silent reassurance, a reminder that she was no longer alone. The fake heiress watched everything with reddened eyes, her body shaking uncontrollably. "So what happens to me now?" she whispered. No one answered immediately, because the truth was cruel. No matter how the story began, 20 years of love could not disappear overnight. Mrs. Harrington closed her eyes painfully before speaking in a broken voice. "You are still my daughter." The fake heiress instantly burst into tears of relief. But then, Mrs. Harrington slowly turned toward the girl standing beside Mr. Lancaster. "But she is my child, too." The sentence shattered the fragile balance in the room. The fake heiress's expression froze completely. For the first time, she realized something terrifying. The family she once believed belonged entirely to her would never be the same again. And worse, no matter how hard she tried, she could never erase the existence of the real daughter anymore. The girl remained silent for several long seconds. Then finally she looked at Mrs. Harrington calmly. "I'll come back," she said softly. Hope instantly appeared in Mrs. Harrington's tearful eyes. But not as someone begging for love. Her voice was steady now. "I spent 20 years surviving without this family." She lifted her chin slightly. "So if I return..." Her cold gaze swept across the stunned ballroom. "It will be because all of you finally learned how to deserve me." Not a single person in the ballroom dared to respond. Her words were calm, yet they carried a weight heavier than humiliation itself. Because everyone knew she was right. For 20 years, she had been abandoned, insulted, and treated as insignificant. And now that the truth had surfaced, the same people suddenly wanted forgiveness, as if a few tears could erase decades of pain. It couldn't. Mr. Lancaster's eyes lingered on her quietly. Then, for the first time that night, a faint trace of admiration appeared in his cold expression. Most people in her position would have clung desperately to the Harrington family's wealth and status. But she walked away from it with her head held high, and somehow, that only made her impossible to ignore. He gently placed a hand against her back. "Let's go." This time, no one dared to stop them. The massive ballroom doors slowly opened, revealing the dark city glowing beyond the rain-covered glass windows. But just as they were about to leave, "Wait!" A weak voice suddenly echoed behind them. The elderly grandmother slowly stood from her chair, tears still staining her face. "There's something else you deserve to know." The girl's footsteps paused instantly. A strange tension spread through the room again. The old woman looked at her with trembling regret. "The night you were switched," her voice shook violently, "there was another child." The entire ballroom froze. Mr. Lancaster's expression darkened immediately. "What do you mean?" The old woman closed her eyes in pain. "The nurse who helped me that night, she didn't act alone." Fear began creeping into the girl's chest, because suddenly, this no longer sounded like a simple mistake driven by greed. It sounded planned, carefully planned. The grandmother slowly reached into her purse with trembling hands before pulling out an old, faded photograph. "There was a man," she whispered. "A man who paid a huge amount of money to make sure..." your existence disappeared completely. The photograph slipped from her fingers onto the marble floor, and the moment the girl saw the face in that picture, the blood drained from her entire body. Her fingers trembled violently as she stared at the photograph on the floor. The man in the picture. She knew him. Not from high society, not from the Harrington family, but from the darkest years of her life. A cold chill crawled slowly down her spine. Mr. Lancaster immediately noticed the change in her expression and bent down to pick up the photograph first. The moment he saw the face, his eyes narrowed dangerously. Victor Hale. Several powerful figures in the ballroom instantly looked horrified upon hearing the name, because everyone knew who Victor Hale was. A man whispered about in fear across the business world. Ruthless, untouchable, a billionaire whose empire stretched far beyond legal industries. But what terrified people most was the rumor that anyone who betrayed him simply disappeared. Mrs. Harrington looked between them in confusion. "You know him?" The girl's lips parted slightly, but for a moment, no words came out, because memories she had tried desperately to bury were now crashing back all at once. Rainy nights, dark hallways, men screaming, and a pair of cold eyes silently watching her from the shadows. Finally, her voice came out barely above a whisper. "When I was 16, her fingers tightened unconsciously. I worked at one of his underground clubs." The room fell into stunned silence. The fake heiress stared at her in disbelief. Mr. Lancaster's expression darkened instantly. But the girl continued speaking softly, almost as if trapped inside her memories. "One night, I accidentally overheard something I was never supposed to hear." Her breathing became uneven. There was a conversation about a missing child, and a wealthy family paying millions to erase someone forever. The grandmother suddenly covered her mouth in horror. "Oh my God!" The girl slowly lifted her eyes toward the photograph again. "At the time, I thought it had nothing to do with me." A bitter smile appeared on her lips. But a week later, her voice nearly broke. The club burned down. Several guests gasped quietly. I barely survived. The ballroom became deathly cold, because everyone was finally realizing the terrifying truth. This was never about inheritance, never about jealousy. Someone had wanted the real Harrington daughter dead from the very beginning. A suffocating silence spread across the ballroom. Even the rain outside seemed quieter now. Mrs. Harrington's legs nearly gave out beneath her. "Dead?" she whispered shakily. "Someone wanted to kill my daughter?" The grandmother burst into tears again, but this time no one pitied her anymore, because her greed had not only destroyed a child's life, it had placed that child directly in the path of monsters. Mr. Lancaster's jaw tightened dangerously as he looked at the photograph in his hand. "When did you recognize him?" he asked softly. The girl lowered her gaze. "Tonight." Everyone froze. She swallowed slowly before continuing. "When I entered the ballroom earlier, I saw him for a second." A chill instantly swept through the crowd. "He was standing upstairs near the balcony." Mr. Lancaster's expression changed immediately. And then he disappeared. The bodyguards near the entrance instantly moved after hearing that. Phones came out. Orders were whispered rapidly. The atmosphere shifted from luxurious gala into something terrifyingly close to a manhunt. The fake heiress unconsciously stepped backward, panic flooding her face. "What is happening?" No one answered her, because for the first time tonight, everyone understood something horrifying. This wasn't a family scandal anymore. It was dangerous, deadly dangerous. Mr. Lancaster suddenly removed his coat and wrapped it firmly around the girl's shoulders before turning toward his men. "Lock down the building." "Yes, sir." "No one leaves without my permission." The guests immediately erupted into nervous whispers. Some looked terrified. Others looked furious, but nobody dared oppose him. Because if Victor Hale was truly involved, then everyone in this room could already be targets. The girl's breathing slowly became unstable. Old memories kept flashing through her mind. The fire, smoke, someone grabbing her wrist while flames spread around them, and a deep voice whispering near her ear, "You should have disappeared the night you were born." Her face instantly lost all color. Mr. Lancaster noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him slowly, fear finally appearing in her eyes for the first time that night. "I remember his voice." The moment those words left her mouth, Mr. Lancaster's expression turned ice cold. "What did you remember?" The girl's lips trembled slightly. Her heartbeat pounded violently against her chest as fragments of the past crashed through her mind like broken glass. The fire, the smoke suffocating her lungs, strong hands dragging her across the floor. And that voice, low, calm, terrifying. "You should have disappeared the night you were born." She suddenly grabbed Mr. Lancaster's sleeve tightly. "He was there," she whispered. "The night of the fire. Victor Hale was there." A wave of shock spread across the room. Mrs. Harrington nearly collapsed again. "But why?" she cried. "Why would someone do this to you?" No one answered, because the question itself was terrifying. Why would a man as powerful as Victor Hale spend 20 years hunting a child? Mr. Lancaster's eyes darkened thoughtfully. "Unless—" "This wasn't about the Harrington inheritance," he said quietly. The girl slowly looked toward him, and for the first time all night, fear appeared even in his eyes. "Someone was trying to erase your identity completely." The fake heiress stared blankly at them. "I don't understand." But the grandmother suddenly let out a broken gasp, as though realizing something too late. "Oh, God." Everyone turned toward her instantly. Her entire body was trembling now. "There was another rumor back then," she whispered weakly. Mr. Lancaster stepped closer. "What rumor?" The old woman's voice cracked violently. "That the baby switched at the hospital." She looked directly at the girl. "Was never supposed to survive because her real father was too dangerous." The ballroom exploded into chaos. Mrs. Harrington's face drained of all blood. "What are you talking about?" But the grandmother only shook her head in panic. "I never knew if it was true. I swear I didn't know." Mr. Lancaster's voice became dangerously calm. "Who is her father?" The old woman slowly lifted trembling eyes toward the photograph still clutched in his hand. Then she whispered the words that made the entire room go silent. "Victor Hale." The world seemed to stop. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the rain outside felt distant now. The girl stared at the grandmother as if she had stopped understanding language completely. "What?" Her voice came out barely audible. Mrs. Harrington shook her head violently. "No. No, that's impossible." But deep down, terror was already consuming her, because suddenly, everything made horrifying sense. Why someone had paid to erase the child. Why the attacks never truly stopped. Why Victor Hale kept appearing in the shadows of her daughter's life. The grandmother burst into tears. "I only heard rumors back then," she cried. "They said Victor Hale had a relationship with a woman from a powerful family. But when she became pregnant, people started disappearing." The ballroom fell silent again. She vanished before the child was born. The girl's breathing turned uneven. A sharp pain spread through her chest as countless unanswered questions from her life suddenly collided together. No father, no records, no past. As if someone had deliberately erased every trace of her existence. Mr. Lancaster's expression remained unreadable, but the grip around the photograph tightened slightly in his hand. When did Victor Hale find out the child survived? He asked coldly. The grandmother shook her head desperately. I don't know. But before anyone could speak again, a loud buzzing sound suddenly echoed through the ballroom. One of the massive television screens mounted near the stage flickered violently, then turned on by itself. The crowd gasped. Static filled the screen for several terrifying seconds before the image finally cleared. And there he was. A man in a black suit, sitting calmly in a dimly lit room. One leg crossed over the other, a glass of wine in his hand, his face handsome, cold, deadly calm. Victor Hale. The entire ballroom froze in terror. Meanwhile, on the screen, he slowly lifted his eyes and smiled, directly at her. Happy birthday, daughter. Victor Hale's smile remained on the giant screen, calm and elegant, like a man attending a casual dinner party instead of terrifying an entire ballroom. But the girl's body had already gone cold. Happy birthday, daughter. Those 3 words echoed endlessly in her mind. Mr. Lancaster immediately stepped in front of her, shielding her from the screen as his bodyguards surrounded the area. Track the signal, now. Yes, sir. Victor Hale chuckled softly through the speakers. You've grown into quite an impressive man, Lancaster. His tone sounded almost amused. But unfortunately, this is a family matter. Mr. Lancaster's expression remained icy. She is not your property. For the first time, Victor Hale's smile faded slightly. On the screen, his dark eyes slowly shifted toward the girl again. You survived because I allowed it, he said quietly. The entire ballroom stiffened. But now that the truth is exposed, people around you will start dying. Mrs. Harrington nearly screamed in fear. The girl clenched her fists tightly. What do you want from me? She asked. Victor Hale looked at her silently for several seconds. And strangely, there was no hatred in his eyes, only exhaustion. I want to end this. The room fell silent again. Then Victor Hale slowly stood from his chair. Your mother is alive. The girl's entire body froze. Mr. Lancaster's eyes narrowed instantly. Victor Hale continued calmly. She's been hiding for 20 years because powerful people wanted both of you dead. Every person in the ballroom looked horrified now. The girl's voice trembled for the first time. Where is she? Victor Hale stared at her quietly through the screen. Come meet me alone. No, Mr. Lancaster said immediately, but Victor Hale merely smiled faintly. If Lancaster follows you, his voice turned cold. Your mother dies. The screen suddenly went black. The ballroom exploded into panic. But the girl stood, completely motionless. Because after 20 years of pain, one thought now consumed her entirely. Her mother was alive. 3 nights later, heavy rain poured across the empty harbor. The girl stepped out of the black car alone, the freezing wind whipping through her hair. Far ahead, an enormous yacht waited silently in the darkness. Mr. Lancaster's voice echoed through the hidden earpiece. My men are surrounding the harbor. She closed her eyes briefly. No matter what happens. Her fingers tightened slightly. Don't let him kill my mother. Then she walked forward alone. Inside the yacht, dim golden lights illuminated the massive room. And there he was. Victor Hale stood beside the window in a black suit, calm as ever. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then finally, he turned toward her slowly, and for the first time in her life, she was looking directly at her real father. You look like her, he said quietly. The girl's eyes turned red instantly. Where is my mother? Victor Hale stared at her silently before speaking. She's safe. Then why ruin my life? For the first time, pain flickered across his face. Because loving us destroys people. The girl froze. Victor Hale walked toward her slowly. Your mother came from one of the most powerful political families in this country. When she became pregnant with my child, they ordered me to disappear. His eyes darkened. When I refused, they tried to erase all three of us. The girl's breathing became uneven. So you abandoned me? No. Victor Hale's voice cracked slightly for the very first time. I hid you. Silence filled the room. I thought if the world believed you were dead, you could live freely. A bitter laugh escaped the girl's lips. Freely, she whispered. I suffered my entire life. Pain filled Victor Hale's eyes. I know. At that exact moment, gunshots suddenly exploded outside the yacht. Both of them froze. Mr. Lancaster's voice roared through the earpiece. Get down! The windows shattered instantly. Armed men stormed the harbor from every direction. Victor Hale's expression changed immediately. They found us. Chaos erupted across the yacht. The girl stumbled backward as gunfire echoed violently around them. And then, Victor Hale suddenly pulled her down just before a bullet tore through the wall behind her. For a brief second, she stared at him in shock, because despite everything, her father had protected her without hesitation. Victor Hale looked toward the door coldly, then back at her. Listen carefully. His voice became calm again. There's not enough time. He reached into his coat and pressed a small silver key into her trembling hand. Everything I own, every secret, every account, his eyes softened slightly, belongs to you now. The girl's face turned pale. What are you saying? Victor Hale gave a faint smile. The only reason I stayed alive this long, another explosion shook the yacht, was to make sure my daughter survived. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Mr. Lancaster rushed inside with armed guards behind him. The moment he saw her unharmed, relief flashed across his face. But then, a gunshot rang out. The girl's eyes widened. Victor Hale's body jerked violently as blood spread across his black suit. Dad! She screamed instinctively. The entire room froze. Victor Hale looked down briefly at the blood staining his chest before lifting his eyes toward her one last time. And strangely, he smiled. Not like a criminal, not like a monster, just like a father finally seeing his child safely alive. Go, he whispered. Then he shoved her toward Mr. Lancaster just as more gunfire erupted. Mr. Lancaster immediately caught her and pulled her behind cover. No! She cried desperately. But Victor Hale had already turned back toward the attackers alone. The final thing she saw was her father standing in front of the shattered windows, gun in hand, protecting her path to escape. After learning the entire truth, Lamdu did not rush to take revenge like everyone expected. Instead, she quietly gathered every piece of evidence, recordings, fake contracts, and documents that proved how the Lam family had stolen everything from her for years. She understood one thing clearly: emotions alone were not enough to destroy a powerful family like theirs. That night, the rain poured heavily. Inside the top-floor meeting room of Lam Corporation, the cold white lights reflected off the pale faces of the shareholders. The atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. On the giant screen appeared undeniable proof of embezzlement, money laundering, and corruption that had been hidden for 8 long years. And the person exposing it all was Lamdu herself. "Have you lost your mind?" Madame Lam shouted, her voice trembling. "Do you want to destroy this entire family?" Lamdu only smiled faintly. Her calm expression was far more terrifying than anger. "Family?" she repeated slowly. "The moment you threw me into an orphanage to protect your real daughter, I stopped having a family." The entire room fell silent. Lam Tien Tuyet sat frozen in the corner, her face deathly pale. The woman she had envied for so long was actually the one whose real life had been stolen. She wanted to speak, but no words could leave her throat. At that exact moment, the police burst into the room. The sound of sirens echoed through the storm outside. Chairman Lamb was handcuffed in front of every shareholder. Madame Lamb collapsed into her chair, staring blankly ahead like her soul had left her body. In a single night, the empire that once stood at the top completely crumbled. But what shocked everyone the most was that Lamdu kept nothing for herself. Every share she inherited after the meeting was sold, and all the money was donated to charities for orphaned children. Because I know exactly how abandonment feels. After that night, she disappeared from the city. No one knew where she went. Until 6 months later, in a small seaside town, someone saw a young woman in a white dress sitting quietly outside a tiny bookstore, reading beneath the warm afternoon sunlight with a gentle smile on her face. Beside her was a little girl she had adopted. No more hatred, no more revenge, only a new life that finally belonged to her.